Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video we are going to be doing a wrap-up video. This is actually my first wrap-up video I've ever done. Usually I do a wrap-up over on my Instagram, so if you are not following me there, be sure to do that. I will leave a link to it down below. Usually I show you my wrap-up based on my planner. So this is my Always Fully Booked planner. It has like a wrap-up right in it with like all the information. I put like a little chart with all my daily pages read. I usually show that side of things over on Instagram, but I thought I would try something new and do a YouTube version of a wrap-up and talk about all the books that I read this month. So hopefully you enjoy seeing my first wrap-up, and if you do, I'll keep doing them for the remainder of the year. We're going to be talking about all the books that I've read in August. So in August I read 8 books, which is actually pretty good for me. Usually on average I read about 4 or 5. So 8 is really good and I'm really happy with that. I've read some really awesome books this month. There were a couple of disappointing ones, but we'll get into that. Let's just jump into all the books that I read in August and what I thought of them. So the first book that I read in August was With the Fire on High. I read this as an ebook. I ended up giving this book 3.75 stars overall. I did enjoy it. I'm not a big YA contemporary fan anymore. So just as a preface to this, I don't typically love YA contemporary anymore. It's just not my favorite genre, but this book was pretty good for what it was. With the Fire on High follows a 17-year-old girl named Imani, and she is a teen mom, and she is trying to basically figure out the balance of her life between being a teen mom, going to school, working a job, and like all the pressures that come from each of those responsibilities. Imani has an incredible passion for food and for cooking. She has amazing culinary skills, which I personally really enjoyed that element of the book. I went to culinary school for a year and loved it, and so that element of the book was really interesting to me. I loved all the descriptions of the food. This book made me so hungry. So Imani creates kind of this like magic in the kitchen, and the food tends to evoke like a special memory or a special emotion or feeling. It brings a lot to life. I thought that that element itself was really cool. I really liked how it was a contemporary story with this like hint of magic in it. Like I said, Imani is trying to find her way. She's trying to navigate all the responsibilities that she has between school and this new boy who has shown up, not to mention working and trying to be a teen mom while she lives with her grandmother. She also has a fear of following her passion and knowing what is right for supporting her daughter and what's realistic for her as a mom. And so the whole element of it, her kind of dealing with her responsibilities, that's essentially like the entire plot of the book. Overall, this story made me really happy. It made me really hungry, but there wasn't that much going on plot wise. It was, I guess I'm just not really used to YA contemporaries anymore. Like I said, I don't really read them that much, so I was expecting a little bit more from the plot than what I got, but for what it was really enjoyable. Even though there wasn't a lot going on for the plot, it was like really rich in a lot of elements. It had like a really rich feature in culture and family and friendships. It was a really sweet and endearing story. If you like YA contemporaries, I would definitely recommend checking it out because it was really, really good for what it was. Really enjoyed all of the elements of the family and getting to know Imani's culture more and kind of what she has to deal with going through those issues while also being a teen mom. It did have stuff going for it, but I just was expecting a bit more from the plot than what I got. So the second book that I read in August was Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. I'm not going to get too much into this one because I did a whole reading vlog on this, so I will leave a link to that above and you can go check out my thoughts on the book there if you're interested. This was a reread for me. It was the first time I have reread it since I was a teenager. Overall, I ended up giving this book initially 3 stars, but after I thought about it, I bumped it back down to 2.5 stars. But like I said, if you are interested in hearing my thoughts on that and my experience rereading it, you can check out the reading vlog. It was fine, honestly. Definitely not as good as when I was a teenager, but it is what it is. Moving on to a more enjoyable read, the third book that I read in August was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I did this through an audiobook and ended up giving it 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. It was my favorite read of this entire month. This book follows Monique Grant, who is a reporter who is chosen to write a biography of a famous Hollywood actress, Evelyn Hugo. Monique isn't sure why Evelyn ended up choosing her to write this story, as she has no experience doing so, and she doesn't write like huge stories. She's not very popular or well known, but she gets chosen and she's not going to turn it down because she thinks it's going to be a fantastic career move for her. So she ends up taking the story and she sits down with Evelyn Hugo to hear her story and then eventually publish a novel about it. One story follows her scandalous life as a Hollywood starlet, and her story takes place from the 50s up until about the 80s. And it also deals with the 7 husbands that she had along the way of her Hollywood journey. I'm not going to go too much more into the plot because I think it's better to go into this book not knowing that much. It's so much better to experience this story as you go and experience Evelyn's story as you go, not knowing what to expect. And because I didn't know what to expect, what actually ended up happening in this story completely blew me away, and it went in a whole other direction than I was expecting. I will say the audiobook for this was absolutely fantastic. I had 2 narrators, one for Monique and one for Evelyn Hugo, and I really liked that element because it felt very conversational and it kind of brought the story to life. And that's the thing I love about Taylor Jenkins Reid books, is she has this way of writing characters that just come to life. I always think that they're real people. So when I read Daisy Jones and the Six, I thought it was a real band, and Evelyn Hugo, I thought she was a real actress. She just has this way of writing these real complicated but realistic characters. They feel so real and they just come to life on the page. Like I said, the story was not at all what I was expecting, but I absolutely loved it and I could not stop listening. I devoured this book. I absolutely loved it. It was beautiful and heart-wrenching and captivating and addicting and entertaining. I cannot recommend this book enough if you like historical fiction. Even if you don't, it was a beautiful story. It completely surprised me, and yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Next up, my 4th read for August was Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. Again, I'm not going to go too much into this because I do have a reading vlog on this, so if you want to check it out, you will find it linked above and you can go and experience my thoughts on this one. I ended up giving this book 2 stars. I didn't enjoy it. This is Twilight told from Edward's perspective. It is an incredibly long book. It's well over 600 pages. I don't think it needed to be. There were interesting elements, but for me it was overshadowed by everything I didn't like about it, which, like I said, you can find in my reading vlog. So I'm not going to go too in-depth about this book more than that because I've already talked about it more than I think it deserves. Moving on, the next book that I read in August was an ebook, and it was Heartbones by Colleen Hoover. This is her newest release. I read it on Kindle Unlimited. I really enjoy Colleen Hoover's books. They're really emotional and overly dramatic sometimes, but I like that. If I believe in guilty pleasure books, she would be one of mine. I find them really enjoyable for all the drama and emotion that goes into them. Her books tend to kind of punch it in the heart, and that's what I've come to expect from her books. So her newest book, Heartbones, just released. Actually, the ebook released a little bit ahead of schedule, but its official launch day, I believe, was August 27th. This book follows Bea, who has had a pretty hard introduction to life. She lives in a lot of poverty, and she's had pretty much everything against her, and she's kind of had to survive on her own. Growing up for her has been really hard, but she's been determined to make something of herself and not let that bring her down. She has a plan in place for a really promising future, and she's really excited about it. She just has to make it through the summer, but something really traumatic happens, and an unexpected death changes everything, and she has nowhere to go now. So she ends up having to contact her kind of not present father, and she has to move in with him for 2 months in Texas. She has to navigate this new life and this new family with this father that she barely knows and hasn't really been around in her life that much. But she also meets a boy named Samson. While Samson and Bea are seemingly complete opposites, they are drawn to each other and they have this really intense connection. They agree to spend the summer together and then move on. They're just gonna have like a really surfacey fling for the summer, and that's what they agree on. But circumstances happen, everything changes, Bea's life gets flipped upside down and she kind of has to navigate all of that. That's essentially the plot. Obviously, Colleen tends to write books that have a lot more depth than that. I'm not going to get too much into it because I think it's better to find that out as you read. With Colleen Hoover's books, I find that always the case. I like to know as little as possible going into them, just because she always tends to have a topic of interest at hand per book, and I think it's fun to discover what that topic is as you read. Heartbones was not my favorite Colleen Hoover book. It was fine, but I don't think it was that memorable. I was expecting a lot more. Like I said, Colleen Hoover's books tend to like gut punch you right in the feels, and I didn't get that from this one. I didn't really connect with the characters as much as I thought I would, and I felt like the plot moved too quickly. I didn't have enough time to like really like feel things. I wasn't a big fan of the insta connection that Samson and Bea have. I don't like insta love at all. It's one of my least favorite tropes, and so that could have played a role in why I didn't enjoy this one as much either. I did like the commentary of the book, which like I said, I'm not going to get into. I think it's more fun to discover that on your own. So yeah, like I said, I was just expecting more from the book, more from the characters, more from the plot line. It just felt too rushed and short. Flew through the book. It is a really short book. I think I read it in about a day and a half. So there wasn't much to it, so that's probably why, but overall it was fine. It just wasn't my favorite of her books. Moving on to the last 3 books that I read in August, which was a trilogy, and that was the Winners trilogy by Marie Rutowski. So the first book is The Winner's Curse, the second book is The Winner's Crime, and the last book is The Winner's Kiss. I read this series through like the print version, but I did the audio for the last book kind of while I read the print as well. Like it was a bit of a mix. I didn't love the audio version, but it was nice to be able to listen while I worked, so that's why I wouldn't recommend the audio. I didn't like it that much, but the books themselves were absolutely fantastic. I gave 4 stars to the first one and the second one, and 5 stars to the last one. I'm not gonna get into the plot of the last 2 books because it is a series, but we will talk about the first one. So The Winner's Curse follows Kestrel, who is the general's daughter. And Kestrel's people are called the Valorians. Her people, and her father specifically, kind of overtook this land and this people called the Hurani. When they overtook them, they ended up enslaving the Hurani people, and they now use them as slaves. So this book begins where Kestrel is in the marketplace, and she accidentally finds herself at the slave auction house, where a slave is being put up for bid. And Kestrel seems to have this like weird connection to the slave that is currently being auctioned off. She ends up bidding for him, even though she kind of struggles with the whole slave concept. But for whatever reason, she ends up bidding, and bidding highly on the slave, and winning him. Because of that, she sets a whole series of events into place, but it takes off from that moment of purchasing this slave. Kestrel finds herself fighting against this connection she feels to the slave, whose name is Aaron, all the while not knowing that he too has some secrets and hidden agendas. From what I've heard, like the books seem to be marketed more as like a romantic fantasy. Well, that is true. It is heavy on the romance. I would say there's so much more to it. It is so politically intriguing. The politics alone in this book are just so well done. There's so much more than just the romance. And if you were reading it for that, that's great. It is really good. But the world itself is just so much bigger. Very much political war series, more than just like a romantic fantasy. This series overall pleasantly surprised me. Like I said, I was expecting just kind of like your typical YA trilogy. And what I got was so much more than that. It just had so much depth. And I found that it got better and better as I went. I loved the last book in the series. So as I continued reading, I got more and more invested in all of the court politics and all of the intrigue. There's spies, there's the epic romance, of course, there's political scheming, there's war, there's political intrigue, political alliances, there's betrayals, there's heartache, there's like family drama. There's Unlikely Friendships. It had like a little bit of everything in it, and I ended up absolutely loving this series. I would highly recommend it. I found it really underrated. Not a lot of people talk about it, at least from what I have seen. I know it's a bit of an older series. I loved how much depth it had in it and how much it pleasantly surprised me from what I was expecting. There was just so much more to it than I thought there would be. So yeah, those are the 8 books that I ended up reading in August. I really enjoyed, for the most part, all of the books that I read. My favorite book of the month was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I also really enjoyed the Winner's Trilogy. That was probably my second favorite, followed by With the Fire on High. That was also a really good one. I would love to hear what books that you have read in August and what your favorite one was. Leave a comment down below and let me know. And I hope you enjoyed watching my first wrap-up video. Let me know if you want me to continue making them every month. If you're not already, I would love if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.